Well, welcome. So good to see all of you. For those of you who are joining us, always we welcome you into the space and into the conversation and at the kitchen table here as we dialogue about our own life and what it means to be healthy as a man and as a masculine identified person and how we navigate current issues and events. My name is Payne, he, him, his, and I will let the other two here share their name and then we'll continue with the conversation as usual.
Hello, everyone. My name is Felix Martinez. My pronouns are él, him, and his. Reporting from St. Paul today from the main offices of Esperanza United in St. Paul, Minnesota. Super happy to be in the conversation.
Glad to be back with y'all. Hey, everybody. My name is Seanhayes. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And just, feeling excited to jump right in.
Very cool. This is our 50th episode, I should say. I was going to say anniversary. I was like, oh my God, that's been so long. But 50th episode, and we're still young. Even if it's our 50th anniversary, we're still very young. We still look like we haven't aged at all. But our 50th episode. So thank you so much for supporting us and joining in on the conversations thus far. About 2 years into it, we started this during the pandemic, and we were like, how are we going to build a space where there could be more engagement and more impact, and people can hear what we're thinking about, what we're talking about, what we're doing in terms of healthy living and making healthy choices in our life as men and masculine folks, right? And what does that really mean when we talk to other men and masculine folks in our communities or across communities? What does that even mean as well, too, as we engage each other to build connected communities and communities that are thriving and are about belonging and about purpose, right? That's really the values of Men As Peacemakers and also as the Men and Masculine Folks Network. So happy to be here. I think we're going to take some time to reflect on, since we started, like, what was it like? How did we get here? And we're looking forward to more episodes, obviously, with all of you and more conversations as well too, because there's always things that are happening in our world, and our world is always changing, and our society is always changing, and people are at hard moments at this very moment as well too. And then we just finished up. I know a few of us, 6 of us, went on our leadership retreat to northern Minnesota last week. I'm losing the dates here because I've been traveling a lot for work. So last week, and so we can reflect on that as well too, meaning me and Sean, since Felix was not able to join us, so we can reflect on that as well too. But what are the two of you thinking, Felix and Sean, since we started to where we're at now, and any thoughts or feelings or like how we've gotten to where we're at? And we have people that have joined us as guests, like what were some memorable conversations that we had, and what did we talk about that sort of gave you aha moments, or what were your learnings and growth along this period? Maybe those are things that we can reflect on and think about.
Thank you, Peng. For me, even thinking the 50th episode it's been a process, a time that I've been able to grow a lot as a man, as a better man and masculine folk, and also to have that space that I personally don't have, sometimes in my community, of being able to have this type of conversations, create this time of brotherhood where we can, that I personally always look forward. I wasn't able to join the retreat, something that I was, like I mentioned to Sean before, I was really looking forward for this time of the year, just because it's for me is very important, just because sometimes that's the space that you need to be out of your house, to be out of your everyday, if you're out of your computer, even your phone, but just to be with nature, just to be with amazing, and very inspiring people. So that's something I was looking for. Hopefully I'll be able to make it year, I wasn't able to make it because I had like 5 groups during those days that that retreat was taking time. It was taking place, but I was able to work with youth and work with with the community. So something I'm looking forward. But yeah, going back to the question, for me, it's very important this space to continue having this type of conversations to hopefully engaging with other men in the community that want to be part, that want to hear more, that they want to learn of how to have this type of conversation. So this is something that for me is something that have helped me grow, have it may give me sometimes information that I'm able to use in my conversations with youth. So super happy of this opportunity. I'm looking forward to 50 more episodes. Hopefully we're gonna, like Penn said, keep looking young. With less hair, but probably still looking young. But super happy, to be able to even to have conversation and have invite you know uh, people from our community, people that have been able to share also their experiences as a men and masculine folks and our experience and our role as men in our communities to create change, to end gender-based violence and to be better role models. That's something that bring me a lot of pride. I'm super proud of you guys, of the work that you do. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. There's so many good things that I don't know, but super excited to be here.
I'll say quickly, Felix, that we have a great team building activity for next year's leadership retreat that we will share with you.
I'm looking forward to hear a little bit about that, but thank you.
I'm excited about that as well. Definitely more to come on that. But yeah, I definitely, I guess I'm, resonating and maybe echoing a little bit of what Felix has shared. I think for me, when I think back on 50 conversations, it's like, whoa, how did that happen so quickly? How did time pass? And at the same time, it's like, the amount of personal growth, and then as well as like relational and family growth that has sort of come out of these conversations. It's like we sort of talk about the work that we do and, starting with individuals, and like we as individuals can sort of learn and grow and practice these new healthy, strategies and practices together. And then it's like it ripples out to the people around us, which I have certainly been able to see in a really positive way in my life. And yeah, just like thinking back to, some of the wonderful folks who have shared their time, coming on and talking with us and sharing their stories and their experiences. Thinking back to when Lina and Sarah came on, and, more recently having Steve Henn, the poet, join us, and this most recent one with Matisse from Brown Boy Project. I mean, it's really powerful, I think, bringing in more voices like that too, because it gives us this great experience of hearing from other folks and hearing and learning about, the shared experiences that we have and the similarities, and also like all of the differences and the different ways of thinking about how we do this thing called life together, I guess. And so I guess I'm just feeling some deep gratitude that this sort of idea, that we launched this and that it has, proven to be very fruitful and has really helped me grow that muscle, like the practice of having these like real open, sometimes hard, sometimes difficult, sometimes emotional, sometimes tricky feeling conversations. And that has really translated over into my life, into my heart, into my brain. And so, yeah, a lot of gratitude for you two and for Ed and Roderick and Serrano and all the other folks who've joined us, more regularly. Missing y'all right now. But yeah, it's been a beautiful experience.
Yeah, I know. I remembered that again. This was really an idea, and it came out of a brainstorming session that particularly Ed's friends were doing in the Black community with Black men, and we were like, oh, maybe we could parallel something similar to that and have conversations uh, and really start it because we were in the midst of the pandemic had just started, COVID had just started, and we were no longer going to be seeing each other because our the way in which we were always building community and doing engagements in community were was by holding spaces for men to come from different communities to have these conversations in person. And we got to a place where it's like, oh, that wasn't going to happen anymore because of COVID. And we didn't have testing then 2 years ago. We didn't have the shots 2 years ago at the beginning. And so it was like we needed to socially distance, quote unquote. And we were like, at the same time, we knew that that was also a pattern, that social distancing term and definition would really make men go into their own spaces and really isolate, right? And they can dig themselves into a rabbit hole, or we can dig ourselves as masculine folks into a rabbit hole and not connect with anybody because we're already moving that way as individuals. So we wanted to continue with the value of connected communities and connected individuals and building connected communities as a value of ours, and really live that out. And this, I think, was something that we were like, we're just gonna try this and see what happens, right? And we grew from what, one, two, or three viewers to now, like, I don't know, Sean, how many viewers do we have now?
Gosh, I was just looking at the statistics for it was grant reporting season a couple weeks ago, but I know that we've had well over 40,000 people who have viewed at least
Yeah,
parts of in some of our conversations. So it's
right.
pretty massive.
Yes. And so definitely thank you to those who supported us and watched us all along the way and really hopefully got something out of it or took some lessons learned from it. Definitely. We've been able to actually, like, I think, see the kinds of way in which some of us and many of us were vulnerable in this space and really sharing some personal things that were happening in our life as well, or our thoughts about things that happened, such as the January 6th I don't know what to call it these days, but the January 6th thing that happened at the Capitol, and talking about the difference between people who hold power and those who don't hold power institutionally, and what does that mean. So I think those are, and I always appreciated the different ways in which we each shared our viewpoints and our thoughts, and the way in which we, excuse me, were in conflict at times or contradicted maybe perhaps each other, or held the tensions in the conversation with one another, and being able to actually, like, sort of model that with other folks as well too, if there were any. And then all the guesses, I think, to Sean's point, for sure, I think all the guesses were absolutely phenomenal when they shared, the poets, the counselors, the artists that came on, our other colleagues, female identified colleagues who are supportive of this work of engaging men to be healthy in community. And what does that mean to be healthy, to Matisse's point, and to, the last conversation that we had 2 weeks ago. And that will continue that conversation, because it's really about, for us, it's really about continuously defining and reshaping that definition of what it means to be healthy in our own lives as men. And it's really healing, I think, to Felix's point, for sure, is that I think sometimes there's a lot of, like, therapists or spaces out there that advertise and talk about men's healing and men's health. There's like that magazine on men's health, and talks about the issues. And these are things, and I would want to say that it's been really healing. And I am one proof of that. And I think both of you are as well too, that these may just be random and various and thoughtless, quote unquote, conversations, but it is, to Felix's point, I really feel the connection, and I really feel like the healing part of it as well too, like the learning and the practicing with one another. and the being able to push one another to think differently about our lives and behaviors and the choices that we make day in and day out, and to be able to actually feel more freer in how we express ourselves and who we are and how we move in the world, and not to be contained in that quote unquote man box that we've been boxed into, to believe or move in within, right? And that it's not to say that you can't do any of those things. It's to say, how do you do those things, but in ways that are healthy and not impactful to other people, or not going to be violent to other people as well too. So a lot of, I think, random thoughts and various thoughts about how we got to this 50th place, starting from a dreaming idea, and like, what are we gonna do now? We can't see each other in person, and since then, we've been sporadically been able to see each other and build community with other folks. It's not just the three of us. I think the three of us tend to be the anchors of this conversation, as we get others to join us here and there as well too, and that's always appreciative. But I remember after a year, when things started opening up about a year ago or something like that, and we had our retreat, and we were just exhausted, right? We just wanted to be in space with one another. We just wanted to see each other, because it was too much Zoom. By then it was just too much Zoom, and it was just too much virtual connection, and it just felt different. It feels different, and it still is different to be able to connect physically in space and see each other. And it's different than when we see each other in Zoom. And I think there is some semblance or resemblance of quote unquote normalcy this last week when we went on our retreat, and be able to be in space and really have conversation about what does it really mean for us to live feminist and queer lives, and what are those practices that allow us to really be living those two ideals, quote unquote, if we can say that. And it was a really good conversation, or a good time with people, and just enjoying each other's company and being in space with one another and catching up and seeing each other physically rather than over a virtual platform. So I have a lot of random thoughts, and love to always continue this conversation. Love for others to join us in the conversation, or feel free to invite yourself and be live with us as well too. We'd like that, or suggest other speakers that can come on. We're always looking for that, and trying to get new guests to come on and share their thoughts and ideas with us as well too, about what it means to get men connected in community and masculine identities to be healthy.
We're for sure going through, difficult times. We can see it in the news, we can see it, on the streets. It's funny because this morning I saw, I think it was a Facebook post saying, especially for people that live in the Midwest, don't forget to set your clock back 1 hour, on Sunday and on Tuesday. Be careful that you don't set your country back 50 years back. When you hear that kind of stuff, it kind of make you like, whoa, but it's so true. The importance of voting, the importance of having these conversations. I know sometimes, at least I know in my culture, in Latinos, young males or the youth are not allowed to have this type of conversation or have these topics, just because they see young people like immature, like they don't have a spot yet. They need to earn it, in order to be able to have these type of conversations. So having the opportunity of doing this on, and Facebook, and be able to stream it, and using YouTube as a platform, is an opportunity to open our minds. At least I see it for my Latino community, to listen to the youth. They have so much knowledge, and sometimes we forget about that. And we need to be sure that they have the courage and they have the support of us adults, in order to be sure that they can take the lead, in the future. Eventually they're going to be the ones doing the kitchen table conversations, so we can sit back and keep supporting them, because I think this is a job that I can see myself doing for the rest of my life in one way or another. Even if I continue doing this type of work, or if I even go to work at a McDonald's, I can continue doing this type of work. But yeah, it's important of supporting those young folks, young masculine folks, and learning as men, take the leadership of women also, that I know for some men is really hard, because they can still see, like you mentioned, Peng, like men being, the person, the decision maker. And we live in times that if we work together, if we empower each other, the impact that we can have in our communities is humongous. It's living in communities where everybody feels supported, everybody feels safe. Young women and girls can go out at night, that they don't need to be scared of they're gonna be harassed or they're gonna be raped or anything like that. So there's so many ways that we can support each other. And with these conversations, we just want to put a little seed there, just to hopefully inspire other people to say, you know what, if Peng and Sean and Felix and all, and Roderick and everybody can do it, and Serrano, I can do it too. And it's simple. Social media is free. It's just, take a chance and do it. And sometimes it take a little push from our friends, from our loved ones, to say, you know what, let's give it a try. Not doing it for the follows, don't do it for the, to be famous, but do it because it's our responsibility as human beings living in Earth to support each other. And that's the type of community that we want to live. That you can go out, you're gonna feel supported. That you're not scared of being judged. You're not scared of being rejected or people seeing you. You're Latino, so I bet you're a roofer. You're Latino, you probably work in Burger King. We need to change all those stereotypes that cause so much harm. The gender roles, the same thing. Men also need to cook. Men also need to clean the house, take care of the kids. We're functional men, so we need to do that. And probably the goal of this conversation and what I do is to do that. I want my daughters to live in a community where they feel respected and they have the same opportunities as men. And something that is going to take time. That's something that I always try to learn new things. Now working more in close with MAP, with Men As Peacemakers in Duluth, I've been able to learn a lot more about what commercial sexual exploitation is, human trafficking, and seeing it from a different lens, pornography, strip clubbing, all that kind of stuff. That's something that, from what I learned in the past, I thought, they did it by choice, that, but I never had in mind that a lot of those peoples that are working that field, they're being exploited, so when you start understanding that, it just totally changed your mind. And we realize that we live in societies where there's a group of people that are taking advantage of and or roles as men and as a community members is to change that. So I'm really sad when I hear you talking about the retreat, because like I said before, that's something I'm always looking forward. And it's the space to continue learning, hear from some of you what you guys are doing, what things new you guys are doing. So maybe say, what, maybe I can do something like that with the Latino community. Maybe I can just make some changes, in order to be sure it fit, because all communities, are different. There's some similarities, intersections, but we all are unique and special, and something that we need to embrace, especially for BIPOC communities. And something that I always encourage the youth, don't be embarrassed of speaking Spanish, and embrace that, your culture, your food. If you don't do that, we're gonna lose that. Newer generations, they're not gonna be able to speak our language. We're not gonna be able to make these amazing dishes, that remind us most of the time our grandmas and our moms, and so that's crazy, because you're thinking grandma and mom, you're never thinking that, but that's what we want to change. That's why we want to make a difference. So I think if I can keep talking for hours, but yeah, so I think there's so much we can do, and we need to look for ways to creating change in our communities. It's possible. Don't be afraid of ask for help. I know some people think asking help is a sign of weakness when it's not. We have the power. I think we as communities, we're so strong, and it's scary just to see how sometimes people want to separate us. You know, they don't want us to work together because they know the impact that this could have. So I'm really thankful to have these conversations. And I don't know, Sean, if you have something else to add.
If you ask my wife, I always have something to say. Gosh, it's, it makes me think about a lot of different things. I was thinking about just like in the most simplest terms, when we think about humanity, when we think about our communities, it's like humans are designed to be in connection with each other and to be in community and to have different roles within communities and to step in and offer those skills and I just think that's that has been lost in a lot of ways, and I especially think about white communities, white men and masculine folks, who, the majority of this, the media and the messaging and the narratives around, what it means to be a man, is really geared towards and shoved towards those folks. And it's like, when we think about how do we get back to like a connected community where we're taking care of each other, where safety is paramount, and that's something that we all strive for. And I feel like what I've learned through these conversations is like, this is actually where it starts, like we start off with, the friendships and the relationships and the connections that we have, right? Whether it's our biological, related blood families or colleagues here, I feel like at the beginning of this experiment, maybe kitchen table experiment, I probably would have said like, you two are, like my colleagues and we're doing this thing together. And now it's like through all of the connections, through all of the conversations and being intentional to keep having conversations, that's where you see relationships grow and build and trust is built. And then, I do feel safe to reach out to Felix and Peng or any of the other, guys to say, hey, I'm really struggling with whatever it is, whether it's grief, whether it's relationship problems, or just like how we do this work in community, like that, the realization, and it's such a gift, right? That we are not in this alone. We have many, many, many resources, like through all of us different folks. And so that just feels really powerful to me. I mean, it's revolutionary. And it makes me think also of, some of the feedback we've kind of gotten through these last 50 conversations, which I think, I read the comments and those things and I'm like, oh, dang, that's kind of like a negative thing. But a lot of the pushback has been like, it seems really disorganized and it's like, they don't really have set topics and things like that. And it's like, that's intentional. That's because our conversations at our kitchen tables in our homes are not agendaed and planned out. Like we are sharing thoughts, we're sharing feelings, we're also listening and like really trying to deeply listen to each other, and to feel into our friends and colleagues and folks here, into those experiences, and that takes work. And sometimes there's silence and sometimes there's like, wow, like those mind-blowing moments or, where you don't know what to say and you just kind of have to sit with it. And I think we, as a lot of folks, are really uncomfortable with just being in silence together. And yeah, so it's been interesting to kind of, literally be practicing this when, gosh, I don't think that I have really ever had conversations with men in my life like these. Like there's really nothing in my life that compares to this and to the gosh, it's like I can't even think of a word really to describe like the bigness and the wholeness and like the power that the connections, that I feel with you, Peng, and with you, Felix, and with the other guys, that's like deeply transformative for me. And the healing piece, I mean, there's, gosh, like Felix, right? I could talk all day about about this stuff, and I really enjoy this. It's like it brings me hope to be in these spaces and to have these conversations. It helps me think and imagine and empathize and try to understand other folks' experiences. And there's just like a lot of love and laughter, right? Too. Like we laugh a lot. There's always smiles when I think about masculinity. It's like all the dudes in photos are just like hard, and like there's no smiling allowed. There's no like joy or fun and so that's like a huge piece of it too, which is I think life is very serious a lot of the times, and so to really highlight and bring in the joy and the humor and the funniness around some of this stuff too, as we learn together, is like another huge thing.
Well, I appreciate that so much, Sean. I appreciate that so much from you, and I think that I do want to highlight the part about like our goal is to be organic. And to not have any planned agenda. And that is very, very intentional because we don't want to be performative in the way in which we engage one another. We don't want to be performative in the way in which we interact with one another. We don't want to be performative in the way in which we are with one another, right? Nor do we want to be performing whatever it is that we think and people think we should be performing. And I think hence that's why, to your point exactly, we call these kitchen table conversations, because these are just conversations that are very random for sure, because it's intentionally planned to be random about just things that are happening in our life, because these are the kinds of conversations that we know men and masculine folks are having in their neighborhoods, are potentially having in their church congregations. When you see people, it's random conversations about like how you're doing. What do you think about what happened last week? What do you think about what's happening here in the environment? And how do you do that in ways that are not about not valuing other people, but making sure that people feel connected, making sure that people feel purposeful in their connection and their belonging, making sure that you're not judging, other men or masculine folks, or making sure that you're not like performing or just saying it just to say, right? But that there's some like, we would hope that there is in some of our conversations here that, or all of it, that what comes through is values, what comes through is connection. And when we say that again and again, is about connection. And connection isn't about agenda. Connection isn't about performance. Connection is about making sure that people feel whole when they're here with us at the kitchen table, that they're feeling that they can connect with us, even though they may disagree with what we're saying or with individually what someone is saying, and that they can have a healthy conflict and healthy dialogue with us, quote unquote, right? And so I think there are goals there, but it's different enough from what we know men to be in conversations with one another, right? And we wanted to show something that was different. And I think that could sometimes be new, and it could feel like the randomness. It could feel like this makes no sense. It could feel like this isn't what they're supposed to do. And that's all great, because there's plenty of shows we know that are on TV that are very random, that people watch, like the Dr. Phil's, the Talk, all the late night comedy shows. They talk random stuff that we talk about as well too, and they commentate on it, and they have commentaries on it, and we do too. We have commentaries on those things as well too that we see in terms of what's happening. And there's plenty of other YouTube channels that also share random thoughts about comments and talk about random things as well too. Or like nowadays, everybody's trying to be a TikTok whatever, right, performer or influencer, and some of the things that I was sharing with Sean last week and the other folks last week was like, some of them people just don't talk about anything. They just do a panorama view, and every video is just that of a different scene. So randomness is actually appreciated. So thank you for that comment. And I'm not just speaking to that specifically, but I want to lift it up that we appreciate the randomness because our lives as men are so organized already. And for us to always be performing, Michael Jackson Katz always talks about the man box, and it's the same as a call to men with Ted and Tony and them always talk about the man box, about how we're supposed to perform, how we're supposed to certainly behave in certain ways. And what we're trying to do here is obviously in the last 50 conversations is to break out of that, to not be performing, to not be acting inside that box, right? To not be like, men don't do those things, or this is what men should be doing only, right? And that we appreciate the organic and unagenda way that we actually interact with one another in this space, right? There are other spaces where we've created where it's quite agenda, but this is just not one of those spaces, right? This is just not the space that we're gonna agenda. We have goals to it, but it's not an agenda place. And I think that that's why, to a lot of what both of you were sharing, Felix and Sean, is that that's why those things, those feelings of joy or laughter or sadness or appreciation come out, because it's because of the randomness and because of the unagendaed way that we actually interact with one another, right? And we're not just trying to stay on topic. Why aren't you staying on the topic of the conversation? It's because the energy is flowing. Some days and some weeks that we come and we have tons of topics that we could talk about, and one just sticks out the most, and then we just run with that topic, right? Because that's the flow of the energy of where people are being connected at the moment, right? So it's also, that's the healing part that I think that shows up in this space as well too, is that piece. So I just wanted to highlight that more, not only for the two of you, for others who are watching and listening as well too, so that there's clarity about how and why we got to creating this space, and for myself to be regrounded on the randomness of how we are and who we are in this way as well too, which I really appreciate.
I am Mr. Agenda. and I said just because I'm one of those that always need to have an agenda, but through these conversations to learn from Penn and Sean, I have learned that sometimes having an agenda is really not the best thing. When I facilitated spaces, sometimes I have an agenda that I want to be, okay, we have 5 minutes to talk about this. We have 10 minutes to talk about that. And sometimes when you realize you don't provide the time for the individuals to listen and to have that time, like Sean said, those awkward silent moment where people are, intentionally thinking about it, how they see it in themselves. And that's something that I've been trying to put it away, not be strict to the agenda, because I'm causing more harm than good. You see it with the shows on TikTok and YouTube. You have people are looking for drama when having these type of conversations. They want to, everybody want to have their perspective, their point of view, and at the end it's me versus Sean, or it's me versus Peng. But at the end, there's, like Peng said, there's no closing. And people love that. They love the drama. The people love to hear people arguing, to yelling to each other. And what we're trying to do here is something different. Is having those nice conversations. We're providing that space and doing it in a respectful way. So that's something that I really appreciated. But like I mentioned before, when you talk about the agenda, I used to consider myself Mr. Agenda. So I put in the private chat here, I'm Mr. Agenda, just because it resonated with me. I saw myself on it and said, you know what, I need to bring my experience, because I'm totally sure the same way that I learn about it, there's going to be other people that maybe have their agenda. And sometimes when we're talking different topics, we're not able to do a proper closure to the conversation, so everybody have a better understanding of masculinity is not me versus you or you versus me. It's this. We need to find ways that as human that we can work better together in ways that are more meaningful and more respectful. So I will consider myself not anymore Mr. Agenda, but that's still on me that sometimes old habits are hard to break. But I'm very thankful to have people like Sean and Peng that push me and remind me and make me accountable, in a nice way when I, trying to get something done, and sometimes doesn't need to be that way.
Just happening to tell a short story that that came to mind when you were saying that, Felix, because I too am certainly a very Mr. Agenda type person. And so last week, I was doing some planning, thinking about some groceries for our retreat, planning for 5 or 6 guys, like what are we going to have? And everything I got basically got eaten up the first day. And I was like, my plans, that, what do I do with my plans? And it was this really like funny moment, also like really cool. Cause like at one point we were like, all right, what do we want to do? And I think Serrano immediately was like, meatloaf. So Peng and I ran to the grocery store, we helped each other find like, what do we need for this? Looking at a recipe that one of our other guys had given us. And so it was just this really like organic, again, like this is how life happens. Like it doesn't go according to plan most of the time. That's a big lesson I'm learning as a dad for a toddler, almost not a toddler. Like, and that the idea, not idea, but the practice of being present, like not holding so tightly to like what we think, a conversation needs to be, or a retreat space, or, whatever. And actually like just like letting our whole selves come into those spaces and like seeing what happens is like pretty cool. And it also makes me think about, like when we first started having these conversations, I remember, many of our conversations were about like, events happening, like current day events, whatever, you want to call them, and having lots of conversations about George Floyd's death and things like that. And I, and myself and lots of other folks could sort of see like there's this whole sort of outpouring of people who, see the violence, who value folks in the Black community, value queer and trans folks, value the Latinx community, and all these different diverse, beautiful communities. And like this idea of allyship was like so huge. Like, how do we come alongside? How do we show up? How do we share the things on Facebook? And a lot of that, myself included, I think in those early, COVID months, lots of folks were just really worried about, and still I think, about doing like the right thing and showing up in like the right way for folks who are experiencing oppression and violence, and that feels so performative to me now that I, through all of these conversations, right, and really doing a lot of thinking and inner personal work and healing, honestly, to be like, actually, I don't think that's what allyship is. Like, I think it's actually really about building relationships with folks in those communities, not sharing a Facebook article or like, here's this new anti-racism book that I'm reading, but like actually getting into communities and connecting with people. And then it's like, when shit happens, when another Black man is murdered, when we see Asian hate and all of these different ways that are all of the diverse communities and othered communities are impacted, it really becomes more about, hey, my friend is hurting in this community, and how can I like extend care? How can I show up? That's interesting. I'm getting emotional about that. So that's, I don't know. But and maybe just honoring that I have that emotion instead of wanting to just run right through there and get myself back together. I think it is like we are deeply connected as humans. And so as I've rebuilt and worked to build these new relationships, it's like, oh, whoa, like there's so much power, there's so much beauty, so much creativity and just care for one another that can happen when we like put the books down, we like get off the screens and stop like, keyboard warrior fighting people online, when we actually like have a conversation about values, about how we're actually doing as men folks, masculine folks, in this culture, in this time. That's different, right? That feels really different than like someone who's like, hey, it's, such and such Black History Month, and I'm going to share a couple articles and then nothing the rest of the year, versus actually like, I'm going to invest in organizations in my community like the NAACP. I'm going to go to those meetings. I'm going to meet folks. I'm going to connect. I'm going to listen. I'm going to build. And that building together is so powerful. It's like there's like nothing that can stop that power, I think, when folks come together. So it's like that hope, that very strong belief in like the community, the thriving community that we're all working towards, and that we like see glimpses of in these conversations at our community events, in church services and all over the place. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop rambling now here.
I think beautifully put, Sean. I think that's the beauty and the spirit of this platform, right? We call this a platform because we're hoping that others, and those of you who joined us and watched us and listened and continue to follow us, continue these conversations, that this is a launch pad for you to spark conversations in your own friendship circles and relationship circles and things like that. But it is for us, we know that the spirit of healing for us isn't just about sitting in meditation, isn't about doing yoga together, isn't about doing therapy, group therapy together. It isn't any of the traditional methods of healing that we think about, right? But it is the spaciousness, the value of spaciousness, the value of listening, the value of reflecting, the value of gaining deeper insight, the value of awareness and beyond awareness, right? To your point about the ways in which we talk about the honorings that we do on this platform of Black History Month, or of people that we talk about, and gaining a wider and a deeper understanding of like, not just through association with our friends and our family that we're connected to those issues, but we understand why we are connected to those issues without those relationships, right? Without those relationships. So because so much of these days, and I don't want to take the humanity part out of it, but I think that what we can see in community happening is, I understand that issue because I have somebody that's in my circle that is experiencing that, right? And I can see and I can be sympathetic towards it. What we're trying to say, I think, here on this platform is, how do you go beyond that? How do you understand going beyond that? And I think that, to your point about aspiring allyship that was coined by the Women of Color Network, is how do you keep practicing, right? Beyond that relationship, and how do we live as men and masculine folks in our values? How do we align ourselves and practice from a place of valuedness, quote unquote, rather than a place of like based on human connection and relationship, even though that's part of it as well too, right? But how do we not disregard our values? How do we not compromise our values and really live from that grounded in place? Because that's what I think leadership looks like for men and masculine folks. And that's what I think leadership looks like for people who are practicing leadership in community as well too. And the connectedness and relationship is the spirit of healing. The relationship of healing, the relationship of being connected and feeling a sense of belonging, and you being welcomed in all of who you are and where you're at, and not being judged to be a certain way or behave a certain way is healing, right? So there's so many components that we do that may not look traditional in the sense of healing, but it is healing in this space. And I think every time, to Felix's point, every time we have these conversations, it is the continuity and the cohesionness that we build upon each other that brings me to be grounded and regrounded and recentered, and centering myself and centering community, centering the relationships that I have, keeps me accountable to the people that I'm in relationship with, right? A reflection of like seeing myself in Sean and in Felix and Ed and our guests that come on the show as well too, right? Seeing my story and their story. That's the connection we're talking about. The spirit of healing is in that. When we start to be able to see our stories in our community stories and the individuals who live in our community stories, the more that we can actually not dehumanize them, the more that we can actually be able to say they are a part of us and we are part of them, right? That's what we're talking about, right? We know that violence comes out of dehumanization. When you no longer can see that person as a human being, that is when violence can actually happen. And that is a fact. That's not just because I'm saying it, because I've been doing this work, but it has been proven. And that's the training that people get in the military get, is that is your enemy. Regardless of who that person is, you better shoot and kill that person before that person shoots and kills you. So no longer is that person a person, but it is an object and a target, right? It is a target. That's the words that they use right now. Obviously, I haven't been in the military, but I do know that that's the kind of dehumanization that has to happen for the violence to happen, right? For the killings to happen, for the rapes to happen, right? Because if you still see that person as a human and as a person, and you still see that person as somebody who can think, who can read and write, and who have thoughts and feelings, it's going to be hard for you to do violence to that person. But if you no longer see them as that, then that's when you can do violence. And I say that because of the ways in which I've worked with men who use violence. They've come to that place where they see that person not as a person, but as an object, purely as an object, right? So that's not what we want. We want more than that. We want the connection, we want the relationship, and so appreciative of these last 50 conversations. I really look forward to, again, to what Felix is saying, 50 more conversations, and what we be reflecting on at our 75th conversation, and where we'll be at in our 100th conversation, a year, 2 years from now, and who will be here with us in these conversations as well. So we hope all of you take that to heart in some ways, and continue to participate with us in these conversations. But I so much appreciate where we're at and how we've landed and where we're landing, and where we're sort of arriving and where we're moving. And so much gratitude for Sean and Felix and our guests and those who've joined us up to this point. And there'll be more, obviously. So that's my closing thoughts here.
Yep, I will also like to encourage people to let us know. If there's any topics that you want us to discuss, please utilize that. We love to hear from you guys, and I also love what Sean shared in our private chat about inviting some of the youth. We all work with youth. MAP work with youth. Esperanza United work with youth. So it'll be very interesting if we can get them all together and listen to them. Have a conversation about how it's been for them, be part of this type of conversation, what they've been able to accomplish thanks to these type of conversations, opportunities that have opened thanks to seeing life and being a better person. So so I'm looking for, again, 50 more. Very grateful from Peng and Sean. There's some people that I really admire, and I was just sharing with Sean that we did a podcast here at Esperanza United, and they asked me, who are your mentors? What are those people you're looking forward and, say, you know what, I need to thank, of course, Men and Peacemakers and Men and Masculine folks, because otherwise I wouldn't be here, or be doing this work. So, people like Peng and Sean and Ed, they're very important to me and people that I really appreciate. So thank you to all of you guys, and hopefully we can keep inspiring other people to do the same. So thank you.
Well said. Well said. I am echoing 50 more. I just had a thought, will this ever come to an end? I hope not. I hope not, because this is something I dearly look forward to every couple of weeks, and love to be with all of you guys, and to be building the new connections as we bring folks in. And so I definitely want to echo, if you have thoughts, comments, issues that you want to learn more about and hear from us and our experiences, we'd love to bring those and pull them into future conversations. And if you are someone who wants to come on live with us, we would certainly welcome and invite you in to have conversation with us, because that's what it's all about, right? All of us doing this together. So I'm just deeply grateful again to both of you, to all of our folks who have been able to tune in, whether you stopped in live for some of our conversation or if you're catching this later. We appreciate you. And we hope that you'll continue to stick with us and get some good stuff from these conversations around healing, around healthy practices, and how to have these conversations in your homes and neighborhoods. So thanks again for joining us for this 50th celebratory reflection conversation. We are grateful to our funding partners, who are Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, as well as the Novo Foundation, for all of their support in us continuing to have these conversations. We will be back for 51 in 2 weeks. That will be on Thursday, November 17th at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, right here live on our Facebook page, which you can click the like button. There's also a follow button. You can also enable notifications, so you get a notification every time we go live, and that's great, because then you can join all of our future conversations. So like that page. You can find us on YouTube. And again, we're very grateful to be in community together and with all of you. So we wish you all well and hope you take good care until next time.